Welcome back to my video. I hope you enjoyed today's story. It illustrates the importance of making informed decisions, as the choices we make can have long-lasting consequences. This story is about one such moment, so please subscribe to the channel. Let's begin. Darren was sitting on the sofa, watching Alao put on her makeup in preparation for a party with her colleagues. She had been invited to every event in the room, which seemed quiet and stifling. Only Darian's heavy sigh broke the silence. "Are you really going?" Darren asked. His voice was heavy and filled with despair. Alao turned back and looked at him through the mirror. Her eyes showed a bit of hesitation. "It's just a company party," Darren said. "I'll be back soon, don't worry." He stood up. As he approached, it was evident from his expression that he was sad and doubting. He asked her how often she had been away from home recently. She replied that she had been out a lot, and that this was going too far. Welcome back to my video. I hope you enjoyed today's story. It illustrates the importance of making informed decisions, as the choices we make can have long-lasting consequences. This story is about one such moment, so please subscribe to the channel. Let's begin. Darren was sitting on the sofa, watching Alao put on her makeup in preparation for a party with her colleagues. She had been invited to every event in the room, which seemed quiet and stifling. Only Darian's heavy sigh broke the silence. "Are you really going?" Darren asked. His voice was heavy and filled with despair. Alao turned back and looked at him through the mirror. Her eyes showed a bit of hesitation. "It's just a company party," Darren said. "I'll be back soon, don't worry." He stood up. As he approached, it was evident from his expression that he was sad and doubting. He asked her how often she had been away from home recently. She replied that she had been out a lot, and that this was going too far. She stood still for a moment, then sighed and avoided his gaze. She told him that they would talk later and that she needed to go now because everyone was waiting for her. Her determination made him feel his heart tighten. He felt he could not hold her back. "I'm afraid I won't be able to make it back again. Alan, I'm concerned that you're prioritizing the party and your colleagues over our marriage." Elowen stood still for a moment, processing Darian's words. However, she didn't turn to look at him. "It's just a party, Darian. I need to go out. We'll talk later." Darian sat on the sofa, his mind filled with concern and doubt. The image of Alao leaving the house without looking back made him even more uneasy. He needed to understand what had happened that evening. He picked up the phone and called Josh, a close friend and professional colleague from college, private investigator who had previously assisted Darian in several challenging situations. After a few rings, Josh answered. "Josh, I require your assistance," Darian said, his voice strained. "However, I have a suspicion that she may be unfaithful to me." On the other end, Josh was silent for a moment, then replied in a more serious tone, "Do you want me to follow her?" "Yes. Can you start now, Darmaran? I will pay you what you are worth. Do not worry about the money, Josh. I need your help. Send me her address and a picture of her." Josh said he would follow her and get back to Darian as soon as possible. Darian sent Josh the information. He sat back in the chair, his heart filled with emotions. 10 p.m. However, he was unable to sleep. His phone was on the bedside table, and he picked it up every few minutes, hoping for news from Josh. The anxiety was a significant burden on his chest, making the minutes feel like hours. Finally, when the phone rang, Darren was startled. His heart was pounding, and he opened the phone to read the message from Josh. She had not attended the party as she had stated she would. Instead, she had met with a man. They had not gone to the bar. Instead, they had held hands and turned into an alleyway. "Josh, please do not stop following them. I require further information regarding their activities." Darian acknowledged and stated that he would provide an update as soon as possible. Josh responded just 20 minutes later. Darian received a text from Josh. The scene before him made him freeze. Ellen and him were hugging each other and had sex right there on the street. Darian was leaning against the trash can. Darian was frozen on the chair, his eyes glued to the phone screen. The images were displayed in great detail, and the scene was made clear through the pictures that Josh sent, which caused Darian to freeze. This made him realize that Alan had betrayed him. His heart felt like it was broken into small pieces. Alan's betrayal was not only a shock, but also a devastating blow to him. Darian sat in the darkness of the room, his eyes still glued to the phone screen, but his mind had drifted into an unknown void. He knew clearly what had happened. He was unable to continue with the marriage. He could not live with Alan's betrayal and lies for another day. The pain in his heart made him want to scream, but he kept quiet, letting the emotions build up inside him like a storm waiting to explode. He considered divorce. He whispered this into the empty space, sounding like a foregone conclusion. Alan had chosen to betray him. He was unable to forgive her. He was unable to continue to pretend that everything was okay. Darian began he would meet with a lawyer to prepare the necessary papers and end this marriage. There was no need for arguments or excuses. Darian was entitled to a divorce. This marriage is over. Darian decided not to confront Alan right away. He did not want to have an unnecessary argument with someone he had lost all trust and love for. Instead, he would choose to leave. The following morning, Darian still exuded a calm demeanor, acting as if everything was fine. She did not speak much, allowing and preparing for work, nor did she mention what happened the previous night. It seemed as though they both wanted to avoid facing the harsh truth. Alan was unaware that in Darian's heart, everything had ended since he received Josh's text as she walked out the door. Darren silently watched Lone's figure disappear, his heart heavy but without regret. She had chosen her path, and now Darian had to choose his path, one that was free from lies and pain. After Alan left the house, Darian began to prepare the necessary procedures for the divorce and pack the necessary items. He packed a few clothes and imported papers into a suitcase, and when he was ready, he walked away without looking back. His heart was heavy but determined. The first thing Darren did was go to the bank. He went in and withdrew the funds from the joint account and retained his rights to them. He was aware that Alan would remain in the family home, which was the place where they had lived together. Darian then proceeded to a location that Alan would not be able to find him. He rented a small apartment in the suburbs, where he could temporarily hide and start anew. It was a quiet place where no one knew him. In the new apartment, Darian began to implement the next step in his plan. His plan was to search online for a divorce lawyer and arrange a meeting. He was aware that it would not be straightforward, but felt it was necessary to end his marriage, which he felt was built on lies. During the meeting with the lawyer, Darian shared everything from Alan's betrayal to how he could no longer continue living in this situation. The lawyer listened and guided him through the necessary procedures. He was determined to end this marriage with all the paperwork and procedures completed. Upon returning home, Alan discovered the house to be unusually empty. The familiar footsteps of Darian were no longer audible, and the usual signs of life were absent. He was surprised not to find Darian, and a sense of unease began to take hold. He proceeded to survey the premises, from the living room to the bedroom, looking for any indication of Darian's presence. His belongings were gone, as was his suitcase and the clothes that were usually in his room. The hangers were also missing, and she felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of unease. Alan was forced to acknowledge the reality that Darian was likely gone, and perhaps even gone forever. With trembling hands, she picked up the phone and quickly dialed his number. When the call connected, she attempted to compose herself, but her voice betrayed her distress. "Darian, what have you done? Where have you been?" she asked, her tone urgent and filled with concern. "Tell me, did I do something wrong, Darian? I'm sorry, but I need to know if I did something wrong." Her voice trembled, tears welling up uncontrollably. She tried to stay calm, but fear took over. "You know everything. You've done wrong to me. You've been cheating on me with another man. You've kept it from me for so long, and now I know it all. I can't live with this betrayal and lies anymore." Allow heard Darren's words like a sharp knife. Everything was falling apart before her eyes. She was unable to respond. Tears were streaming down her face. "You know everything," Darian said. His voice was slow but determined. "You disobeyed me and cheated on me with another man. You had been faithful to me for so long, but now I know everything. I can't live with this betrayal and lies anymore." He paused, and she could hear the sharp intake of his breath. "I'm sorry," she said. Before her eyes, she was unable to speak. Tears were streaming down her face. However, Darren was not willing to entertain any further excuses. He had already made up his mind. "I'm sorry. Our marriage is over," he stated firmly, but with a heavy tone of voice. He had already identified her as a liar and initiated divorce proceedings. When Alan heard these words, she was rendered motionless. Her heart had stopped beating for a moment. She was unable to speak. She was in a state of shock. "Please listen," she managed to say between sobs. Her voice was shaking and desperate. "To me," she said, "please explain. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. Don't leave me. Come back to me." She was sobbing uncontrollably, unable to contain the pain in her heart. "I promise I'll never do it again. Please don't give up. Don't leave me." She received a call from Darian, who ended the conversation abruptly, leaving her with the phone in her hand and unable to contain her emotions. She collapsed to the floor, overwhelmed with sadness and despair. It became clear to her that her relationship with Darian was over, and that there was no going back. The house felt cold and empty, a stark contrast to her loneliness. She realized that the relationship was beyond repair, and that her actions had irreparably damaged it.